All right,
Oh, that's gonna be.
so
Hey.
go ahead.
Today it is July 5th in 2023, and we're at Jenny and my house. And yesterday we attended the 4th of July picnic, and we wanted to have this little meeting to share memories and stories. And so here we are, and here we are, Emery and Jenny and Karen, Paul, Kenny, Carolyn, Barry, Lucy, and Sheila.
And today's Donna's birthday,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Whose birthday?
Donna's birthday.
And how old
It
is
is.
she? She's
54.
29 again. Good for her.
And
She'll
Karen
be,
was
and
gonna,
next year she'll be 29.
Karen was gonna share a little bit of a disagreement she had with Donald's version of the Joe Priest story.
Well, when Grandma was still able to talk, I can't tell you exactly what year it was. I took a writing class and I decided for my project, I would put down the Little Joe stories that Grandma used to tell all of us. And one of the stories was about the ferret. Little Joe went to work for a gamekeeper on the Dinmore estate, which was a big estate that his family from London came to in the summer, but they had a gamekeeper, and the gamekeeper always carried a ferret in his pocket. And when little Joe, to get a little game, it could go down in the rabbit hole, you know, and bring a rabbit out by the nape of its neck. And when little Joe got to be experienced enough, he got his own ferret. Well, the reason I'm telling you all this is I think Donald got confused because little Joe worked for the gamekeeper. My understanding was that young Joe, that would be little Joe's father, because then there was also an old Joe, who was the grandfather. Young Joe was a carpenter, and when he wasn't away from home, working on somebody's house or doing something like that, he was building coffins in his backyard. So I am just positive that Joe Priest's dad was a carpenter and a coffin maker. And there's a story also about a plug of tobacco that was left out on a clean piece of board. Old Joe, you know, he'd chew for a while and then he'd put his plug on a clean piece of wood, and little Joe stole it and he got in trouble, but earlier he dug a rabbit hole under the hedge. And so just when his dad thought he had him, while Joe got under the hedge and away and ran to grandfather's house because grandfather always saved him from his parents when he was in trouble. So that's, everything else sounded great, and there were so many stories I'd forgotten, but I do think, because that came from Grandma, and Donald didn't listen to those stories as late in Grandma's life as I did.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And Donald had a few, well, we won't, a few years.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
You could also embellish things.
No.
So Kenny, you had an idea about how this should start with
Us giving credit to our dad for marrying up.
Oh, yeah, Mom and Dad had a special, unique quality somehow that every one of the Sorenson kids of Jack and Ellen's married up. But that, in this case, our father Jack also married up.
yeah.
One of the spouses married up.
Now, do all of you realize that besides the property over by Denmark Hall, that Joe Priest also owned most of the land we live on now? My daughter Kathy thought that came down through the Sorensons, but Grandma Flora got that when both her parents died. She got that land, and that's how it got into the Sorenson family. Mamie Long, the mother of the Hutchinson, you know, all the Long girls that we all know, got the Denmark Hall place, and then Aunt Selena got money because she wasn't married to a farmer. So that, I don't know if you realize that or not.
I didn't know that.
No, I didn't know that.
So that, there was 160 acres, and then after, later on, the 40 acres where we live was added on to it. But back in that lane it was Grandpa Priest's, and he called it the lower place.
And so that whole row of houses where Anthony's were and
Generated.
Gretchen's, was that included in it too?
No, no, on Sorenson Road? No, where Cretchings lived actually was a cousin, it was Grandpa Soren's sister and her husband. He was a Pedersen. We said Peterson later on. Was he Petter? I think he was. Grandma always just called him Uncle Pedersen. So that was Sorenson. But next to Sherry McDonald, that house there belonged to Grandpa Priest's sister. And Aunt Sarah, she was married to a Dane, Martin Rasmussen, and she had no children. And so I'm assuming somehow that got into the family, and later on, the Genricas lived there. Do you remember when the Genricas lived there?
I do.
Yeah.
I remember Cretchings
Well,
living
we've been to
over where Bobby Dodge lives. at
Yeah,
some
they
point,
live there too.
And then where,
Gary Forgy lives. Excuse me.
did they live? Where Gary Forgy lives?
I think, and then he bought the place on Sorenson Road.
Oh,
But
okay.
before that, he rented.
And then at one point they lived on Sorenson Road, like kind of across the road from where Troy Forgy lives.
Yeah, that's what I'm calling
yeah.
the Pedersen place.
Oh,
Is across
my.
from.
Yeah.
So a brother and sister lived across the road from each other.
Oh, okay.
That was Grandpa Soren's sister.
Somewhere in this tape, Uncle Donald tells about, maybe this Pedersen gave him that watch. Did you hear the story about?
Well, that was Uncle Pete Sorenson.
Okay, that is so confusing.
Now, he was married to Aunt Anna,
Yeah.
but by the time we came along, Pete Sorenson had died, and Aunt Anna was married to Uncle Chris.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So
Oh,
tell-
yeah.
Tell that watch story.
Well, apparently, this is hard for me to believe, but J.O. was honorary to his sister, Bertha, and Uncle Chris felt sorry. Uncle Pete felt sorry for her, I guess, and wanted him to be nicer to her. And so he offered him this watch, Uncle, if he would be nicer to his sister. And apparently he did, at least. And then so Uncle Donald inherited that watch. It's a nice watch. I have this to show for it. But I had never heard a negative word about Grandpa J.O. from any. And it's not all that uncharacteristic for a brother to be teasing and giving your sister a bad time. I know it's in case brothers giving brothers a bad time. I'm familiar with that one.
So is the Pedersen, does that go back to Anina? Is that where that name comes in?
Anina was a cousin of Grandpa Soren's. And now let's see, how did that work? So she was a Sorenson that married into a different family of Sorensons. So Emil wasn't related to us, but Anina was. So that's how we got related to Skinny.
Yeah.
But her name was, maiden name was Peterson.
Peterson, wasn't it?
You think so?
That's the version of the
Okay,
story that
could
I
be,
Yeah.
could be, I missed out on that, but I do know she was a cousin of Grandpa Soren's.
And the connection was back in Denmark.
The connection was back in Denmark, and she came later, and I think probably Grandpa Soren, like he did with a lot of his relatives, helped him get here. Like Uncle Pete. Uncle Pete was a fair amount younger, I think, than Grandpa Soren. when
So-
we got him here.
I've also heard that back in Denmark, we were all Ians.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I've seen, the gravestone of the great, of Grandpa Soren's father, yes, and it's Ian. And I didn't know he changed it. I thought maybe that just happened in customs. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of people's spelling of their names
Yeah.
were changed when they came through immigration because
Yeah.
we Americans like to spell things the way we think they should. Yes.
The clerks on Ellis Island,
Pardon me?
the clerks on Ellis
There
Island
you
that,
go.
that signed them in. I think they had a lot of say in.
Yeah, maybe just,
Yeah, right. Or, and then it had to be hard too, to understand
Yeah.
a foreigner coming in, to give them credit. But Donald brought up a point that I hadn't really thought of. You know, when Grandpa Priest came, he could speak English. It may have been different kind of than the English we spoke, but he could understand and he could make himself understood. Grandpa Soren came without knowing English.
Hmm.
You know, that's just amazing.
Yeah.
All the Danes. Now this isn't for the priest side, but I have a copy of a little history that Aunt Bertha wrote. That's the sister that Grandpa's.
I think I have that.
Yeah,
I think so.
about I think 10 different Danes, and either they married here or they had married in Denmark, but 10 different Danes came to this area. And they were all, or at least one was related to another one in that group. And like Donald said, they all helped each other out.
Yeah.
That was part of their success. So Shoremans, I think they're counting the Petersons, Larsons, like Eleanor Dodge's family. Anyhow, it's an interesting role. And she talks about the parties at Denmark Hall that started way back when.
When was the first 4th of July picnic that anybody knows about?
1923.
23, okay,
23.
okay. So, 100
This
years.
is
So
actually
yesterday
it.
was 100
Oh,
years.
Wow.
Wow.
You know, in Denmark, they have a 4th of July park. And that's in honor of Americans because, and I don't know if that happened after World War II, but they do. We visited the 4th of July park.
Was that in Aarhus or
It was,
Copenhagen?
it was near Aarhus. I can't tell you how far out.
so who started the 4th of July picnic? Which of these
I think it was
grandparents?
Grandpa Soren, I believe.
Do you guys have any
Sorry
any
about that.
memories of your first 4th of July picnics
You know,
or special memories of things that happened?
I remember one 4th of July when Grandpa John O and Grandma Flores still lived over on Moore Road, in the house on Moore Road on the Nylander place. And I was pretty small at the time. I remember really having fun out in the front yard. They had one of those bubble things where you have the little ring that you pick up the soap and blow bubbles out of it.
Oh, yeah.
And all us little teeny kids were running around with a trail of bubbles behind us.
after Grandpa Soren died, the picnic went out to Uncle Al's for a long time, but I don't remember that. And it's funny, I don't remember the one you're talking about. But I remember where Grandpa and Grandma, the new house, Kenny and Carolyn's house, Cy Emerson owned the place across the road, and it was always just pasture, and there was a big baseball game out
Yes,
there.
I remember
And
that.
Mary Matthews, man, she was one of the stars. She was the catcher, and oh gosh, she was very athletic, and she was right out there with all the guys.
And the cow pies.
And the cow pies, yeah.
And it didn't bother her a bit.
No, you're right.
yeah, you were talking about the memories of that baseball.
Yeah,
game.
I
That
really
was-
enjoyed that. I must have been a pretty little shaver,
You
Yeah.
probably were.
probably
I remember
10 or,
Uncle Al especially, cause he'd always bounce me on his knee and he'd make me go out and play baseball, even though, you know, I couldn't catch, couldn't bat, couldn't do nothing. He, Al wanted all of us kids out there playing.
Nice.
I was telling Paul that Uncle Al was the type of guy that he worked hard, but if kids were around, he had time to stop and play with them for a while.
Oh,
He was just fun guy.
one of the stories that I heard again yesterday was about the 4th of July picnic. It was at your house, and I don't know when, but Jeannie doesn't remember this, so it might have been before Jeannie. When we were trying to throw people in the ditch, get them wet. That was kind of part of the tradition. I think Soren had a pretty good hand in that.
That's probably true.
And some people determined that Joe Kelleher and Oliver Johnson needed to go in the ditch. And so they proceeded just to drop their breeches.
They had dress pants on.
Yeah, and Joe Kelleher had heart boxer shorts on. And I think Oliver might have had whitey tighties, I'm not sure. And then Pat says they just walked over and stepped in the ditch.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah,
Rather than throw them in, yeah.
I remember that.
I don't
Good
remember
sports,
that.
but they also gave us a warning when they did this. They says, now, you will leave the ladies alone, right? And so we agreed to leave the ladies out of the water. You know?
So it sounds like that was Soren's accomplice.
Yes,
Right there.
yes, I
Well,
think
yeah.
so. I think so.
Oh, no, in,
I remember that Grandma set the tables under that big tree. Is that big tree still there, next to the driveway in the back?
No, that was a willow tree.
A big willow tree?
Yeah.
Is that gone
The
now?
birch tree that's there now came later.
Okay.
It was a pup when we were having the picnics there, initially.
Yeah, anyhow, you'd be going along getting your food and leaves would start dropping down on the food. And look up Anne Marie, remember Marie
Oh,
Snobble,
yeah.
Jean, and she'd be up in the tree. How she ever got up in that tree, I don't know, but, and so then her mother would scold her and make her come down and.
is that the one that we know?
Marie?
Well, her mom was one of the Lynch twins, Beatrice,
Oh,
Yeah,
Beatrice Snobble,
yes,
and then later on she married her John.
right. I haven't seen her in years, but I
Well, then
can't remember who she
died
was.
early,
Did she? Okay.
yeah, early in her life.
That picture of Sorenson that we've got over there, that he looks awfully young in that picture, but he's got all these big kids.
I think he did always look young, and Gramacina looked kinda old to me.
no,
And,
I,
and she was kind
I
of,
think she was,
I was under
Is that
the
the one
impression
uh-huh,
yeah.
yeah, she did.
that when,
I don't know if this is
Oh,
gonna
yes.
show up at the camera level or not.
That is such a good picture.
We have that one in our house,
Yeah,
don't
we
we?
do too.
We've got that
There's
one
some
somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really good
We used to
pictures.
hang it out.
when
Yeah,
Grandpa
here,
Soren
too.
died, all 6 of his kids got a farm.
160 acres according to Donald, yeah. Yeah, that was pretty darn good.
Yeah,
Each, or are they divided?
Each.
Wow.
When did J.O. get the property by Kittitas up there, where Jack Johnson lives?
Well, I think that was from his dad. In fact, I know because
Yeah.
on that map it says so-and-so and
And then across the road, Jerry Graff's place. at one
He
time.
had some of that, where the
Yeah.
potato cellar.
Because I remember Jerry Graff at one point commenting about his little shop, which is a real short, low thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, those Sorensons are all tall people. Why did they make such a short?
Yeah, I put spuds into that cellar before, but not for Grandpa John, all of it. Nobody could. Or Jerry Dawes.
Mm-hmm.
Barry,
Yes,
I want you to tell the story about kind of an infamous 3rd of July, I think, when we had a humongous rainstorm.
oh, yeah. Yeah, we were getting the last of the first cutting off on the west side of the house on the Montgomery place at that time, and Sorenson, Ken and I were out loading the Gray Ghost with hay. The Gray Ghost was an old truck, an old GMC truck that with the roof caved in from us climbing on it to get it from the top of the hay loads. But we were out there. Soren was running the farmhand to lift the piles of hay and bring them in over and put them on the truck, and we were stacking them, and then all of a sudden this cloud blew in, and it started raining. I said, uh-oh, and then the skies opened up, and so we all came over. We ran into the bed of the truck, and pretty soon the water came through the 2 tiers of hay that were on the truck, and started raining on us some more. So we tried to get into the cab of the pickup. Well, the caved in roof had holes in it from being baked. So that wasn't much help either. And so we ended up having to make a mad dash over to the shop on the ranch, the homestead there too, and of course got soaked in the process.
Yeah.
You remember that, Karen?
I don't remember that, but I have a story about Barry I want to verify, and if you can remember the 4th of July.
I deny everything.
Okay, when we were little, I don't know how far down this went, but we were, I'm sure you kids were too, but my brothers and I were allowed to walk to Twin Bridges. Grandma lived on Mill Road, and she would meet us at Twin Bridge. Then we would walk to her house from there. Do you ever remember doing that, Barry? You walked to Twin
Not
Bridges?
specifically, but I wouldn't be surprised. We wandered around that.
Oh yeah,
We
and
played by ourselves all the time.
whether it's because we took swimming lessons or what, you know, the creeks really weren't a problem. But from Twin Bridges to the Nylander place, there used to be a road on both sides
The
of
high road and the low road, yeah.
the high road and the
Yeah.
low road. That's
Mhm.
right. And one time, I don't know how this happened, but Graham and you missed each other. And it's because you went on the high road. She didn't get there in time, and you went on the high road, and she came on the low road and missed each other. So of course that involved a big search. Whenever anybody got lost in the family, everybody was out.
All hands on deck.
All hands on deck. And you were found then at her house because you'd made it there. You didn't.
Oh, I'm sure it wasn't me that got lost.
I'm sure it wasn't either. I'm sure your
Very
mother sent you
notorious.
up at the right time and
Barry was notorious for disappearing. He just.
Get
I
wander.
remember that, lots of time. Barry's gone. Again. Then go looking, he'd be down Long Creek, fooling around or some darn thing.
Probably throwing clods in the water.
Yeah.
Or one time we were all fishing, the boys and Dad, up Cook Creek. I think it was Cook Creek. And then at some point we all decided to meet back, and well, we all met back except Barry. And so we started searching that creek. We were looking in the water for bodies and whatnot. But anyway, you remember that, Barry?
I was too busy hiding.
I'm remembering hearing this story about when you were at a picnic up on Swat Creek, and they were playing, there were different kinds of relay races and stuff. And Grandma Ellen was throwing in the
Rolling
rolling
pin.
pin throwing contest.
Oh,
And so she reared back, to get a good throw on that thing. Well, unfortunately, she let go of it when she was in her backward motion, and evidently it hit Abbott Anthony's brand new car,
Van der Studebaker.
brand new
Oh.
Studebaker
Get in the
car,
hood.
and Barry was so embarrassed that he hid in the car.
was that a fireman's picnic?
So that's
It could
I
have been
didn't
a
remember
fire.
that.
Probably up in
talking
the-
about
Yeah.
people hiding. Is what brought that.
Seems like you hit a lot, yeah.
Yeah,
Does anybody have any corrections to that account?
Right on the spot. In fact, you added the point of Barry be hiding in the car. I didn't know that part.
neither did I.
That's a funny story, I've never heard that story.
Maybe,
I've heard that story many times.
Have you?
From him.
Oh,
I
from you?
I remember the whole incident, and Mom never heard the end of it because Abbott kept that car for at least 10 years. And so, and he never had the hood fixed.
Oh,
Just
The
deliberately, I
dent
think.
stayed there forever, and probably for that reason.
maybe you could give your mom a bad time.
Yeah.
And so Mom never heard the end of it.
I used to have some interesting times with, every now and then, a bunch of us would end up in Abbott Anthony's pump house. Little pump house out in the middle of his yard there. And of course, it'd be Jerry Graff, Jerry Dodge, me, and then whoever else, and out would come the whiskey.
no.
I remember a lot of, they liked what they do before this happened. They'd put the whiskey in the freezer for about 3 or 4 hours. And when you tasted it, I'd look like, oh yuck, I hate this stuff. But something about freezing it made it
Got
go down
really
like
cold.
water.
Oops.
Oh, talking about some dizzy times. Ooh.
Barry, there's another 4th of July story about you guys coming through.
Oh, he knows what you're talking about.
He just doesn't wanna talk about it?
Not yet.
He started laughing with the grand boys.
I was thinking of the garage and,
Yeah,
The 3rd of July,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, we came,
Oh.
yeah, it was the 3rd of July
Yeah,
with the
we came-
grand boys.
Oh, yeah, we came out here, and it was another one of those storms like the one that Soren Kenny and I had gone through 20 years before, or 30 years before. But it was just a cloudburst. Big old black cloud blew in from, we were staying in town when we came out. It was raining so hard we couldn't hardly see, so we stopped under the underpass on this railroad for a few minutes, but the rain wouldn't let up, so finally we gave up and got back in the car and came on over here. Well, the garage was empty and it was still raining like cats and dogs. And so we drove in the garage so we could get out. And then move the car later. Well, the timing wasn't too good.
Not too good.
Jeannie came home with a car full of groceries.
And children.
And and found her garage blocked.
Somebody was in it. It was that horrible downpour, and just thinking, okay, all I have to do is get home, drive into the garage, we'll be just fine. And then I get there, and somebody parked in my garage.
And you didn't have a cell phone in those
No,
days,
that
to
was
call to
way
the
back.
house and say, Barry, get your car out of my
Get
garage.
you, yeah. But that was
she might have added
Yeah,
excellent.
yeah.
describing the car. But that was the time that there was the rock slide in the canyon, and
Oh.
the railroad track was blocked for, I don't know, a couple of weeks, I think, and even the road was blocked. They cleared that quicker, of course. But that was an amazing storm.
Yeah,
That
and
was-
the Highland Canal washed out up the hill here and came down and flooded your basement.
Yeah, well, did we have 8 inches of water in the basement, something?
Oh, yeah.
Hmm.
Ice chests floating and,
And and you'd just done a roof or something on the house and they didn't do the roofing right, so it was raining in the kitchen.
right, it was coming in
Wow.
through the beam.
And we
They
were setting
didn't
out
caulk
pans
the
all over
window
the
in your
place.
bedroom, and the water was going up, you know, and then came down through the caulking, and then came right down with that beam in there. So, yeah, we had buckets picking up drip.
Buckets and saucepans and
Yeah,
fry pans and anything else we could find.
I don't remember that happening. I remember the storm.
You may not have been in on it.
Well, we weren't. I remember going down the canyon and taking pictures
yeah.
of the slide, but I don't remember the July 3rd here at this house.
And I think we were planning some kind of family thing here on the 3rd. Not taking place at the 4th of July, but just accommodating the people that were coming first. And so it was, that was quite a change of plan.
Mhm.
Do you guys remember, well, I'm sure you remember that the fire department, it was so community-based. And besides the picnic up at SWAC every year, or sometimes at Denmark School, and they take kids on rides on the fire truck.
Yes, I remember that.
And then the other thing is the night of the 4th of July, fireworks
We're
in the
north of your
pasture,
house.
it was just a pasture then.
And it was
And
beautiful,
the
fireworks.
whole community, yeah, they bought a lot of fireworks and there were just cars lined up.
Where was that?
North of our house was just a pasture.
Okay, yeah.
And,
Oh, yeah, yep. Now I can remember.
but there were so many things that, everybody in the community was in the fire department.
Yeah.
People kind of dropped out when there got to be too many regulations, you know. Farmers don't like to take classes on how to do things. They know how to run that fire truck and they know how,
Nick can pull the hose with the best of them.
yeah.
We sure appreciated the fire system when our barn caught fire
Oh, yeah.
out here. And like at 1:30 in the morning, Rosie across the road called and said, "Jenny, do you know your barn's on fire?" No. And we had a loafing shed with chicken house at the beginning of it, and Becky had gotten free chicks. And then as it turned out, the lamp had fallen on it, and that started the fire in the chicken house, and then it went all through that. There was kind of a loafing shed thing or little bays for parking equipment, and then how many feet jumped to the,
Wow, yeah,
maybe
maybe 15 feet.
15 feet to the big hay barn.
And I was just amazed that the shed was just on fire and hot, but the barn was totally untouched. And you could just see I guess there was a breeze going towards the barn, and all of a sudden the wood towards the top of the barn just started smoldering, and then,
Just from the heat.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it just pretty soon caught fire, and it just burned up, and just watched it go. I mean, the fire department came, but they just couldn't contain it.
It was too late.
far, yeah.
But fortunately, there wasn't any wind that night, because the next day there was just ash that had dropped down. But we had how many gallons of gasoline and diesel in tanks between our house and the barn, and that would have
Oh my gosh.
added
That
a
would have
lot
been a
to
big
the.
boom.
It would have been, and if there'd been a wind, our regular wind, the house was completely downwind from the whole production. But we were up at Rick and Judy Wright's not long ago, well, to actually see this video, because we didn't have a VCR player and they did. And anyway, then Rick showed a video of that night. He was taking videos of it.
Wow.
At someplace
He was
in
in the fire department.
That's right, he was.
Yeah.
How many years ago was that fire?
that's
Oh.
a good question.
Yeah.
I remember that night so
Probably
well.
the very late 90s.
Mm.
Yeah, probably 95 maybe, mid 90s.
You were still home, weren't you?
No,
Oh, you
I
were
was
not.
I was in college.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Might have been 94. Might have been when I was in Ecuador. 93, 94.
we could see the fire. I remember calling and Becky answered. And it was like 2:30 in the morning. Would that have been about right?
Yeah.
Is that probably when it was burning? It was
Definitely.
just so scary to see out our window and,
Yeah.
and watch that.
That called to my mind a memory of another fire, and it was we had young nieces staying at our house, and you kids were camped outside
Sleeping
in
in
the
the
tent
back.
in our yard, and all of a sudden, did it start with a boom?
Oh, yeah, it was a
A
huge,
huge boom, and we got up and looked out the bathroom window, and there was I thought there was a jet had crashed. And the military had been doing exercises out there, and I just sure a jet had crashed nearby or somewhere. But we looked out the window, and the old barn over across the road from you guys' house, Gaylord's barn,
Oh,
had just been struck by lightning,
Lightning.
and it did, when you looked, you could see the inside of the barn was just aglow, and there were enough cracks in the barn that you could just see the glow from
and
the frame of the barn was still there.
Exploded.
Yeah.
right, and the side pieces had just been blown off, I think.
Yeah,
So
I
you
guess
could
that's
see
probably what
the
it
uprights and the fire, but it must have just shook the daylights out of you guys.
did.
It did. It
was.
did.
And Gaylord had been out baling
Alfalfa.
something, no, it was alfalfa or straw or something. No, it probably was alfalfa. But anyway, and then I can remember him saying that the blast had just knocked him up against the steering wheel of the tractor.
Well, what caused the explosion?
Lightning.
Lightning.
Oh, yeah, you said that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so we, the firemen, were out there. It was too late for the barn, but we were trying to save the hay,
Yeah.
and because the fire had spread out to the hay, and the windows were just burning slowly. And
And we thought, oh my gosh, the girls are gonna be terrified because they were out in the tent in the backyard, and so I went roaring out there to make sure that they were all fine, sound asleep. Never woke up at all.
Ah,
Poor
What was it
little
like
girls.
for you guys?
Well, Mike was on a tractor west over here in one of the fields, and he thought it was our house.
Oh,
So he came running, scared the heck out of him.
Oh.
Sure, our house was burning.
Yeah.
So from his viewpoint, it looked like it. But
Well,
Shonda,
I was busy. Of course, when the lightning hit, I was sitting up and I out the door. I just went straight down to the fire station and got the fire truck.
I remember calling the fire in, and Shonda had pulled into the shop when the lightning struck, and it just scared the holy heck out of her because it just hit that roof of the shed, the shop that she was pulling into. But yeah, that was scary. I'll never forget that
yeah,
noise and seeing that fire.
Yeah.
Another interesting fire experience was one time we were going to have a fire drill over at Vic Burketta's place, was where now Matt Esslinger lives. And we were just going to do a little drilling on one of the old barns that Vic wanted burned down. Anyway, there was about 6 or 7 old buildings around there that were just worthless. But anyway, we were trying to get the big barn we wanted to burn. We tried to get it going, it wouldn't start. And finally, we got the barn burning so we could do our drill. And the wind came up.
Mm.
That barn just exploded, and it was so hot. I think there was 6 or 7 abandoned little wood outbuildings before it was all done, there was only about 2 left.
Hmm.
It burned about 6 of them. Just when that wind came up and if the fire got going, it just went from building to building and it was a mess. We just stood there and watched. We couldn't do anything about it. We were drilling, but you know, we only had 500 gallons of water, and that only lasts for just a little bit.
A little more practice than you were expecting.
Yeah, yeah. We did a number for fish got rid of his old outing building.
Speaking of old buildings, do you remember when the house was taken down on your place across from Rossback's? The big old 2-story house that had been Ferguson's. You remember that, Barry? There was this house that stood there for a long time next to the creek.
I, very vaguely,
Yeah.
maybe dimly.
I was wondering if they burned it down or if your dad just tore it down, or for a while Mexicans lived there when they came to do the beats. That was a place where.
I don't remember the house at all. I remember cleaning up that corner place so we
Because
could
it had-
climb it, but
Yeah.
I remember finding lots of, you know, things that you find for a whole house in, you know, in the dirt,
Mm-hmm.
nails and horseshoes and stuff in that spot.
I remember another time, right on that same property, we were doing a bridge project.
Oh.
And we just worked on it and finally got the thing done and of all things, right about that time that we finished, Jerry Dodge came by. And he had some whiskey with him and out popped the whiskey. And before it was all over, Dad was the one, Jack Sorenson was drunker than hell. And here I was stuck with Dad, and we had to go to the house, and Grandma Flora and Mom were in the house.
Probably stewing.
Yeah, so I took Dad to the house and just take you downstairs. You know. So we went downstairs to the basement. Dad didn't want Grandma and Mom to see him like that. So when it was all said and done, Mom and Grandma had been watching the whole thing and knew what was going on, and I guess that it ended up all right, but
The drama.
yeah, it was just rather humorous.
What are
You
some?
think your uncle was a little bit of a troublemaker, Karen?
Jerry? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, you mean Grandpa Jack?
No, Jerry Dodge.
Jerry Dodge.
Oh.
That's
He's
her
the
uncle.
one known
Oh,
for drinking whiskey, or Dad, you know, he
Oh.
was a teetotaler.
No, Jack was never a troublemaker. He'd help anybody.
Yeah.
And excess drinking wasn't a big part of his history.
No,
Though it did
uh-uh.
happen
Yeah,
occasionally.
once in a while, but it wasn't, like you say.
What are some of you guys' favorite memories about Grandpa Jack, your uncle?
Well, when my dad left the family, I've told people our lives didn't change much because we had Jack and Ellen, we had Grandma Flora, and Jack took over our farm, and life just went on as usual. And of course, my feelings for Jack and Ellen are, I don't know how to describe. I mean, I just feel so grateful to them. And of course, Grandma Flora too, because they were always there. And you know, in those days, we went to each other's houses. We didn't knock. We just went into your house and found out what was going
family.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But still, to this day, when I come over to your house, I just wanna walk right in.
Sure, that's the way it was. And of course, we had those wonderful roads where we could ride bikes to each other's houses, clear over Mo Road or down to Grandma Flora's where there's no more road.
You know, who destroyed the road?
I did it, yeah.
Matt and Andrew.
I
that
had,
whole-
you don't think I haven't talked to them, and Matt
I
said,
feel feel sorry for the poor guy.
Matt said, well, why should that road still be there? And I said, because it's always been there. There's a history
We
to
like
that
to
road.
walk there.
Oh, yeah, you think I'm mad? Sure, Donald is. She's the one that told me, and I said, you gotta be kidding. They wouldn't tear out that road. I think Matt was hiding it from me. But it was a wonderful childhood.
Yeah.
We had
That's
a-
great.
But Jack, I was just talking to Paul the other day, you go down to their house, if you were there at lunchtime, and Jack would have his lunch, and then he'd sprawl out on the couch, and like Paul and I were saying, didn't matter how noisy it was, he'd have his half-hour nap, and then all of a sudden he'd jump up and be ready to go. Yeah.
And then he'd go a lot of times until 8 or 9 o'clock that night.
Yeah.
And that mom would be out in the garden doing her flowers. Mom would be doing our laundry. Mom would be cleaning up all of our messes in our bedrooms. And Mom would be doing it all.
While Dad was out there working.
Yeah.
Now there's have you watched this whole tape yet? Well, just so that you know and sometimes you can't quite understand what's going on. Jack, he wasn't the troublemaker, but he was the jokester, right? Lots of times. And this started from when he was very young. And Grandma fed a threshing crew. And of course, the boys ate with the threshing crew. And Jack was, I suppose maybe Donald wasn't even born yet. Jack was a little kid in a high chair. And like she said, you never knew what Jack was going to say. You just heard him talk. And this one day, she could tell Jack was going to say something because he'd kind of look around and kind of wait to see. I think he knew how to time it too for his audience, you know. They're eating away, and out of nowhere he says, Clarence Sorenson says when it rains, God's a pissin'. And Donald told this part of the story. Art Peterson's, he just started getting red and red and red, you know, trying to hold in the laughter. And Grandma Flora, of course, was appalled. So Art Peterson must have given the first chuckle, and then you know everybody just laughed, and that was the story of the century about Jack Sorenson.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
There's another one in the tape about a time that the mom or grandpa and grandma were gone
Oh yes.
and
Mm-hmm.
or overnight somewhere, and so the boys had a big party. Yeah, Uncle Bob. I think he was home from the Air Force or something, and so there was a big party. And then when the party was over, they had cleaned up the mess, and they didn't want Grandma Flora and Grandpa J.O. to know about it. And apparently when, I'm not telling this, it's way better, Donald tells it way better, but when Grandma Flora asked, well, did you boys behave yourselves? And Dad said, oh, we had the biggest party you can imagine. And just, it was wild and crazy. And Grandma Flora said, oh, Jack. And then later on, she was,
Ella Watson.
oh, Ella Watson.
Then he called her the neighborhood gossip. Or something, yeah.
Ella Watson. That's another story.
Yeah, it is. That's a cute
Told Grandma Flora, met her at the store or something, and she told about the big party the boys had there. And Grandma Flora came back. Oh, you guys had this big party. And Dad said, well, I told you all that. You want to tell this one?
That little neighborhood Ella Watson story. So it was Tom and Ella Watson, and they were visiting at Jack and Ellen's one time, and we were there. And anyway, Ella was talking about this ache and that pain and whatever, and she says, oh, I guess it's probably just old age creeping up on me. And Tom got this little glint in his eye, and he says, you know, old age creeps up on her every now and then. That was cute.
they lived right across from where, Missy and Travis.
Okay, I was just gonna ask that, that's what I was
Yeah.
kind of thinking.
So they were, right. One of my goals in life, and I don't know if I'm gonna get it done or not, is that, people realize this is not part of Badger Pocket. You know, the realtors have it'll be a farm right next, right out here close, and they'll say, a beautiful Badger Pocket farm. And one time there was a get-together at the museum where they had people come in and set up tables from Risa Creek, Fairview. It was kind of fun to tell their local histories. Well, I had, at my table, I had a sign that said, "You have to go through Denmark to get to Badger Pocket."
I've said that many times.
Yeah, that's good for you, because
And at one time, there was some discussion on where the boundary line was.
that's hard to say, isn't
Yeah,
it?
It
it
comes
is hard
up.
to say, but it seems like it was, Clemens Road.
But when you think about it, a pocket is a little valley between two, just kind of
Yeah.
down in between
Yeah.
two sets of hills. That really doesn't start until the Badger Pocket Fire Station.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But since there's a Badger Pocket Road that goes to Badger Pocket,
yeah.
they are.
I'd say more like Denmark Road is the boundary line.
Denmark Road where Matt lives?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'd say it's more
Well,
like,
Lemon,
maybe Denmark School Road or the next one over from that.
Well, they think about the Danes and where they live.
Well, that's true, but where Steve Hart lives, that's Hamilton Road or something?
Yeah.
The Shoremans lived there. That was one of the Danes.
Yeah, you got that right.
So,
And the Larsons are out
and
there.
the Larsons, yeah. Although one of the Larsons started out on Gary Fordy's place. So I mean, and of course it didn't really follow roads, I guess, completely. Cause they were kind of cow paths in the
Yeah.
beginning.
Yeah, there wasn't much back in the day.
every now and then that question comes up on Facebook. There's a group called Badger Pocket Neighbors, and I've subscribed to that. And every now and then somebody will say, what is the boundary definition of Badger Pocket? So,
Did people answer that?
well, just about the same way.
Yeah, a little disagreement, yeah.
Maybe you guys will have to found your own Denmark neighbors Facebook group.
I might be willing to get on Facebook to do that.
Set the record straight.
Get it straightened out.
One of the memories I have, I don't remember it, I guess I very well, I just heard about it, was we were swimming out back in Cook Creek, behind the windbreak, where the windbreak is now. And I think we had a dam at that point,
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
and we must have swam there. But I remember hearing that Soren actually saved me from drowning at that point. I don't know if anybody else remembers that.
I don't remember that.
No.
No,
Yeah.
back in those days, the dam was below the bridge. Like about, 30 feet or so below the bridge.
Oh, below the county bridge, or?
No,
No, the
No,
bridge
below-
to the Montgomery
below,
place.
below the
The dam bridge.
dam bridge,
Yeah,
where
it
the
was
dam
below.
is now.
Yeah,
The
it's
dam
down
was-
creek.
The
South
dam was
of it.
50 feet downstream.
Oh, that's because the cement structures were up fairly close to Ferguson Road.
It was maybe not, it's probably 50 feet from the bridge, current bridge.
But upstream from the current bridge.
I don't remember that.
Well, there's still an old cement structure, and it's just like 100 feet from Ferguson Road, just after the.
Yeah, Barry and I might be going way back.
Yeah, that's probably more than one.
Well, yeah, I remember.
The original dams were wood.
Yeah,
Mhm.
oh yeah, all wood,
Yeah.
no concrete foundation even.
You guys haven't talked very much about Grandma Flora for being such a remarkable person in your lives.
That's the
Be
trouble,
nice
the
to know
really
that.
good people don't have all
All the grandma
the
flowers.
wild stories about them.
Well, it's okay to tell it.
Well, I have to tell you one story. When I got married, very young, Grandma just, no, you can't just get married in anything. We're going to Yakima to buy a dress. And when it was all said and done, and people knew for sure I was going to get married, boy, she just went all out. I don't mean she spent a lot of money, but she did buy me a dress, and then just was so supportive. Well, and that was a lot of that was being a grandma, right?
Mhm.
But I suppose it was after we moved to the house we're in, so I suppose it was 10, 15 years later, George Graff brought me, and I can't find it now, a little handwritten invitation to Grandma Flora and Grandpa Jono's wedding. And it was written to the Mitchells. Now the Mitchells lived across from Grandpa and Grandma, or Grandpa Priest. And May Mitchell married Frank Graff, and that's how it got to be the Graff place. Anyhow, his mother had saved this all these years, and when she died, he brought that to me. And I had it up on my bulletin board for a while. And I thought, gee, that's interesting. She must have really been a pack rat. But May Graff was sort of the Ella Watson type. Knew everything about everybody. I believe the wedding was in May of 1915. And I was sitting at my table doing something. Maybe I was writing a letter to something or something. And I happened to look up at that, and I saw May 1915. My dad was born in September 1915. My beloved grandmother. I'd been pregnant before she was married. And she, everybody realized they shared, the Sorenson and the Priestes shared a fence line. I mean, they went to grade school together. They'd known each other all their lives. And if there's anybody that Grandma adored, it was Grandpa. I mean, like you said, he was a straight arrow, but anyhow, it just, it didn't take anything away from her. I still thought she was the perfect grandma, but I was surprised. And I knew why May Graff had kept that. She
wanted evidence.
She maybe needed it for some reason. Yeah. But when you think about her and Aunt Selena, she talked about riding ponies up to Vanderbilt Gap. That they take a day and take some food. And then Margaret Ann mentioned
It's
in
the gap in the freeway up there.
Oh,
and Margaret Ann mentioned that Aunt Selena and Grandma Flora broke their own ponies, and nobody else could ride them but them.
Yeah,
wow.
that's in the video.
That's in the.
Grandma Flora always had a way of making me do, in a roundabout way, what I knew I was supposed to do, but I wouldn't do. And she'd just hound me. I mean, so nicely, you couldn't back talk her, because she was just so nice about it. And hound me, and then finally, she'd just get down with the book, homework, or whatever it was. And finally, just to get her off my back, I would just sit down and do it, and of course I could do it. But she had to do her thing to make me do it. I always remember when I get out of the bathtub, it's over where we're living now, Grandma Flora would come in and she'd check behind the ears. She didn't wash behind, and so she'd get out of washcloth and do my ears. What a Grandma Flora. Oh, what a wonderful lady.
She introduced us to a lot of literature too. She read everything in the world. I have a book of I have a set of books. It's the 10 greatest philosophers of the world, and one of these days I'm gonna read them. But she read every one of them, and she knew Shakespeare, and she knew a lot of poetry, and she really was, well, she was self-educated. She really, I don't know, did she go a year to college?
Seems like she went to Tacoma for some reason.
Well, maybe that was college. I couldn't read. She graduated from Ellensburg High School, and then to the college that's now in Spokane, the Presbyterian College.
Whitworth.
That's where she went. And she did. You're right about that. But yes, very patient. Very.
Oh,
Did anybody else? I wish Sandra were here. Doggone it, she'd remember. There used to be a program on the radio called Don McNeil's Breakfast Club.
yeah, I
You remember that?
Yeah.
It was like about 3 hours in the morning. There'd be these different shifts that would come into this fancy hotel in Chicago, and of course I can't remember the name of the hotel.
Was this TV or radio?
Radio. And so this is when she lived over on Moe Road. So when you went to have breakfast with Grandma Flora, you listened to Don McNeil and the Breakfast Club. And each hour they'd have a march around the breakfast table. I don't know how this worked. If certain people got to eat up on the stage with Don McNeil or what. So we would get up, and there'd be band music. We'd get up and march around Grandma's breakfast table with Don McNeil.
That house, when Donald and Betsy lived there, I remember being there, and Pete and I were, maybe I had spent the night or something, and we got in a squabble over who got the orange juice, the biggest orange juice glass. And so Betsy says, okay, one of you pour the glasses and the other one gets first pick. Ginny and I have learned this trick to
Oh, yeah.
keep us from fighting over it.
Yes.
Anyways, so one of us did. We poured the glass, and boy, you talk about micro-majoring. Ellie gets first pick, so that's all.
You know, on the family tree that Marie has done, I feel really bad. Donald is listed, and Marion is listed as his wife, and then Peter as his son, and no mention of Betsy.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel kind of bad.
And how do
about
they
that.
do that? I mean, how do you make one of those things and have it be full?
Yeah, I know. And then did you notice? No, I won't say it. I'm not or on tape. I'll tell you later. Ask me later what I'm gonna say.
The rest of the story.
Well, actually, this has to do with my branch of the family.
Okay.
It looks like Barry's had something just on the tip of your tongue.
Yeah, about Grandma Flora, there are a couple of things. When Kenny brought up the homework thing, when I graduated from 8th grade, I was selected to be, probably by kind of default, to be the one of the honor speakers. There were 3 girls and me, and they picked me by default because my grades weren't that great. And Grandma Flora was my coach to write the speech, and I worked on it, and I worked on it. Well, I was there, I did get distracted and not work on it.
Huh? What?
And she would try to get me back into the grindstone. And eventually, probably kind of like Kenny said, to get it off my back, I finally got down and wrote the thing about 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and it was pretty good. We didn't have to edit very much after that, but I ended up being so appreciative of her for just being patient and sticking with it.
Somehow that story has come down to me that was a darn good speech.
It was what?
It was a really good speech.
It was fun.
That's
It was
kinda
fun to deliver. That people
Yeah.
got a kick out of it.
kind of unique.
I think I still have a copy of it somewhere.
I'd like to see
And I was the last speaker, and the three girls were before me. Probably Helen Dodge and,
Whom
Judy Anthony.
she may have been,
I saw Helen Dodge this morning at Fred Meyer.
Ah,
yeah, Judy Anthony, and I heard from, this is off subject, but I heard from Jerry Ritter this morning, or not this morning, but last year at a reunion, that she's now in an assisted living place down in Tri-Cities.
Oh,
Who is?
Judy.
Oh,
Anthony.
oh.
Oh, gosh.
And I think Jerry and Kathy live in the same place.
who? Jerry Ritter?
Yeah.
So you guys have a lot of memories of Grandma Flora. Do you have memories of Grandpa Jono?
He died before I could get many. I've heard a lot of stories about him.
I've seen a lot of pictures and I confused whether he even knew the guy or not.
Yeah, I think I was about 8 or 7 when he died, so, but,
Yeah,
I was in 5th grade when he died. Uncle Harold came to school the day he died and offered to take any of us home that wanted to go home, and I chose to stay at school because I knew that I'd just be sad at home.
yeah.
And I think all of us stayed at school. He was a wonderful grandpa. He took Jerry fishing all the time. I think probably Jerry was really his boy because first grandchild. Grandpa was on lots of committees and boards and stuff, and I got to go to keep Grandma Flora company to Spokane a lot. He was on the board of what's now Northwest Farm Credit Services, and I can't remember what it was called then. I used to know. So we'd go and stay in a hotel. That was a big deal for me. And then look in the paper, and I would get to pick a movie to go to one night. And I remember picking one called A Date with Judy, and it had Jane Powell, and I can't remember who the man was. And if I picked a good movie, Grandpa really complimented me on it. He engineered, he organized all the trips to Whidbey Island. Do you remember any of the trips to
I
Whidbey
remember
Island?
going to Whidbey Island
Yeah,
and Mutiny Bay
yes,
and watch out for jellyfish getting stung.
yes, yeah.
and the sandbox with money salted into it,
With the what?
coins,
I don't know.
just a sandbox for the kids to play in at the hotel, or the motel,
The cabins?
or the cabins.
And change.
Ah,
But the proprietor would
I
solve it
don't
with coins.
remember that.
Did he have something to do with bringing power to the valley?
He did to the I believe the PUD,
Yeah.
I think, getting it out in the country. Yeah.
And then I thought he did some of it himself. Built the power lines, put them up, and then he turned it over to the electric company.
You might be right. You might be right.
Cause he was just totally responsible for electricity being in his area.
That's the part I didn't know about.
Had he also been involved? Was this him that was involved in doing the town ditch?
That was Joe Brees.
Yeah, yeah, because that was in the film. I know Donald. We're talking about that, and Donald asked Keith. I could hear Keith's voice. What year water first was in the town ditch, and it was early, something like 1904.
Yeah.
We'll have to listen to that carefully again.
Yeah, they got senior water rates, Old County.
Yeah, and of course that was the first ditch, and then Cascade, and then finally the High Line, which was 30s, early 30s. So, yeah.
So at that time, the town ditch went through Craig's Hill, not over, or not around, but through it, and they tunneled through it. And nowadays, it's an open ditch, but it was a tunnel.
And it was, one of our great grandpas that built that tunnel.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
Joe
Joe
Brees.
Brees.
Or he ran the crew that did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he had the contract, hired the crew.
And then one of the great grandpas was involved in building the rodeo grounds. And
Grandpa Soren. He was on the fair board for years and years. So anyhow, and whatever had, but I'm sure the fair board cooperated with the rodeo board to get that all put together. Yeah.
1923.
Does anybody remember, maybe this will jog your memory about Grandpa Jono, but his favorite song to sing to kids was "Riggy Jig Jig and
Oh, yeah.
Away
Oh,
We
yeah.
Go, Away We Go,
We
Away
used
We
to
Go."
sing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad did.
And Grandpa Jack did.
Dad
to
did.
the
Oh,
four
okay,
kids.
yeah.
And my dad did to us.
And grandkids, and
Mhm.
the kids ride on
Right.
Right,
on
yes.
your leg.
And
Well, that was Barry. Barry was
Flippy
famous for the
doos,
flippy
yeah.
doos.
Yeah.
you try that again, Barry.
I wanna
You know
see
what a
that.
flip to do, Dad.
Yeah.
I don't think I've done flippy-doo in probably 30 years,
More than
or
that.
maybe more
More.
than that.
I don't know, you
Not
probably did
unless you had
Bryson
some
too.
other ladies in there that we didn't know about.
I don't remember.
So I have a question for all of the ladies who married into this family and apparently helped the family marry up.
Oh,
What were-
definitely in every case.
What were your impressions, or what were some standout things when you joined the family?
Why don't we start with the older ones?
Devious.
My thing was, when we were going together, Grandma Flora told Barry, don't come back without her.
And he listened.
He knew, he knew.
And he obeyed.
Yes, he did.
I proposed that same day.
Yeah, he did.
Yep.
Oh, did you?
We went down the highway to an overlook
Columbia.
on Highway 14 between the 97 and the Dalles.
Mm.
And we stopped on one of those overlooks and I popped the question.
And she said no.
Foolishly, you said, what?
Probably.
I'll think about it.
If you listen to her brother, Homer, he always teases Dad saying, you had a choice.
Yep, and then with us, it was just, Jack and Ellen were just always so special, as Grandma Flora was. And when I think back to our engagement, we had to go to the Bridge Club. Do you remember taking me out to the Bridge Club, whosever house it was at, to tell them that we were engaged?
Wow.
Jack and Ellen were playing bridge with Paul's and
Snubblies and
yeah, and it was, I had
Dale
never been,
Jakeways and.
Yeah, Dale Jakewees
I
and
think it
Jimmy Paul.
and I think it was Jakewee's house maybe, because I didn't know hardly any of them.
Even Phil.
Take a little break.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's pause it for
Maybe we
just a
can
second.
just
Stories
pause.
don't need to go on there.
Then we'll get back to the same topic.
Talk nice.
Okay. Memories of Uncle
Bob, he was just like Uncle Al. He'd put me on his knees and bounce me and just really pay attention.
He must have lost control at some point. Bounce you on your head.
Yeah. They did all they could to help me out. Anyway, really have good memories of Uncle Al and Uncle Bob.
And Kenny talks a lot about having good memories of Uncle Bob.
Oh, that's good, that's nice. One of the things that I'm reminded every 4th of July is, how we used to see the Kellers all the time. Grandma Flora and Aunt Selena were so close, and of course, the country kids loved to go to the city. Grandma Flora's country kids, and Aunt Selena's city kids loved to come out to the country. and they just did so much together. They were very close, and you can tell in that tape. I think that Donald and Margaret Ann always kind of had a bantering type.
Yes.
They were close in age, and they would banter with each other. And I love the part about Uncle Jack saying when Margaret Ann was getting married that would be the taming of the shrew, because Margaret Ann, when she had an opinion, you knew about it. And when my dad left, Margaret Ann caught him on the steps of the old post office. You know the old brick post office. Gave him a chewing out there. I'm sure. And all he said is, "I know I'm a son of a bitch, but I gotta do what I gotta do."
What, when he left, where did he go? Or what
He
did
went to
do?
live out on the west side with his girlfriend on Strandy Road, I think it is.
Do we know who that was?
Yeah, the wicked stepmother. Her name was Lorraine Shuey, and she was from Oregon, and she married this old Charlie Shuey, who was about 20 years older than her. Had gone to Oregon to buy cattle or something and met her at a dance and left his wife for her. Then he died, and she needed a new husband, I guess, because my dad he was too passive. He didn't tell my mother to knock it off sometimes, and then along comes another domineering woman and just falls into the, in a way, the same, out of the frying pan into the fire. And then he hated farming. He didn't want to farm. But Grandpa General, for the good man that he was trying to set up his 3 sons in farming. And this Donald didn't like farming. Jack was the one that liked farming. And so that was part of my dad's problem too. So he got, I'm not sure exactly how this happened, but got this job with Boeing. He'd studied engineering at WSU. He didn't graduate, something like a quarter within graduation, and maybe the war came along. I can't remember those. So anyhow, he got this job with Boeing that really satisfied him all his life. But it was interesting when he was on the other side of the valley with that woman who immediately taught her kids to call him Dad. And and she wouldn't let us be alone with him, or she wouldn't let him be alone with us. There was always a kid along to chaperone, or so it was. Yeah, and he didn't ever stick up for himself. He just was.
Just a nice guy.
But he was too nice a guy. Yeah, there you go. Because my mother, Grandma Flora once told me that he said to her, "I don't mind when Emily gives the shirt off her back, but when she gives the shirt off my back too."
Shonda just loved.
My mother was a good person, but she kind of was steamroller at times.
How can she help?
Hmm?
How can she help it?
How good? Because she was a Dodge. Yeah.
I mean, just her and Shonda were
They
just.
did.
They just,
Good
yeah.
But how would Shonda not dare like her? If my mother decided she was going to be Shonda's friend, then
They should be friends.
We got some sayings that Emily gave us that are just priceless, on the walls here and there.
Yeah, like, of course, we're on tape with Shonda's illness. Some of Shonda's problems that she would have. Emmy would say, "Just raise the rent. Raise the rent on,
Her mental
whatever."
illness to get rid
Yeah,
of it.
whatever problems she was having. Hearing voices, for instance. Emmy would say, "Just raise the rent, Shonda."
They'll leave you.
And Shonda she loved to call her Sergeant Emmy.
There
She
you
did
go,
some to her
yeah.
face. But she just loved her. She took care of Emmy after surgeries or different things, and, she just loved her. She said, I slept on the floor, she got me all, soft things to lay on, but I slept on the floor, and she bought groceries and bought
Yeah,
gifts.
she
I remember
did,
one
she
time she
did,
says,
yeah.
I had to pick out a shirt for Keith, and she said, I brought it back, and Emmy liked it and said it was a good shirt. So, but, yeah, Emmy was a great person.
Yeah, she really was, but see, it was, I would go down to your house and I'd see your mom and dad kind of snuggling and, kissing each other or whatever. I never saw that. It was not, probably wasn't a good match from the beginning. And the other strange thing, as you well remember, I'm sure, we didn't call our parents' mom and dad, we called them by their first names.
Yeah,
You did?
that's
You
right.
did,
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
always.
And it wasn't till, the divorce that I wanted to make her feel special, and I started calling her mother, and then my brothers joined in. But I don't know why, kids will do that, but their parents will make them go back to mom and dad, it's a thing of respect, but no, we always called them Bob and Emmy.
How old were you when the divorce happened?
I remember that.
Oh,
Well, this happened after Grandpa John O died. Then things started falling apart with Don and Bob and,
Now,
and
do you think
I already
any,
had one. He can't pass up fruit.
had any effect on the whole problem by inviting Parasols or whoever to come live
I
with you
do,
guys?
I do. She was doing a very nice thing, but I think it affected, but I don't know if that would have been the whole thing. By the way, I have to tell you, all her life, she was called Emily until she married into the Sorenson family, and your dad started calling her Emmy after somebody that was in the comic strips. Emmy, now I can't remember the last,
Emmy Lou,
no,
because
that
there was
wasn't
a
it.
comic that way.
It goes back further than that. But anyhow, she'd never been called Emmy until your dad started it.
Was that okay with her?
I think it took some getting used to,
Yeah.
but she was very fond of your dad, so it was okay.
Well, I got a story about when Jenny and I were not married, but one time she was living in Vancouver and she came to visit, and this had been the first time you met the family, I think.
Oh.
And we were looking for a place to park. And so we were parked in the lane down to where Tommy Dodge lives. And just all of a sudden, there was a car right there with his lights right. And Jerry Dodge lived way, way up on the hill, and he was sitting in his living room window, and he saw that car going down towards his property. And
Not even going down toward his property, just barely off the road.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And he
So,
came to see,
he just came. Then he recognized me, and then oh, okay.
Well,
I understand.
yeah, but I thought his reaction was not quite as friendly.
Well,
as all
maybe
that,
not. I
but,
can't remember
yeah.
exactly.
I remember one time Jerry Dodge says, could you keep it, I did losing some gas down at the Montgomery place where Tom lives. He says, yeah, Jerry, I'll keep an eye on it for you. And so I saw somebody go down the lane at night. Or I catch him in the act, I find out who it is. Here, there was nobody living at that place at the time. I went in there and I was gonna help Jerry Dodge. Turned out to be, what was the name, Patricia Dodge,
oh,
and
Tish.
her ex-husband, they were going down there
Oh.
to park.
Oh, I'm good, glad to hear that. Next time I'll.
Kind of a turnabout.
Yeah.
Next time I see Tish, I'll.
I did not tell Jerry.
Oh.
There was, talking about reactions, meeting the family. I can't, I've really been thinking about that. And I can't remember anything other than just being so impressed with this big group of people that got along so well with one another, and, you know, a lot of differences in them, and they seemed to accept one another, and like Bob would come and Emmy would both be at the picnic. And I mean, the fact that,
Well, it was civil, but it was
Yeah.
not cordial.
well, I guess probably what I was thinking more was that Emmy was at the picnic. That went, yeah,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
more
because
that
she
way.
was, yeah, and she was a,
Because she was not the family member, but that she was such a part,
oh,
you know.
yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
I was always impressed with a real tolerance within the general family that I hadn't seen growing up in my family. And so,
But
anyway,
you guys have that now.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's neat.
it is. So,
And you're close and, yeah, that's nice.
I hope Sandra is gonna be notified of all this.
Well,
She
probably
knows what's going on.
she'll have the video to look at.
Yeah, okay, cool.
well, and one thought that we had was giving her a quick call, like right now. You could pick up your cell phone and
Yeah,
just,
and then some of us weren't sure that that was such a good idea, but
yeah, well,
I-
and then
Sandra
the other
wasn't-
one we could call
wasn't
would be
eager.
Peter.
for it. But there's one little Philip Paul story I want to get in. Not appropriate at all, but we were at Bridge Club, I guess mom and dad's house, and for some reason the subject of, maybe I was a college age kid and was just sitting in on this discussion, and they were discussing the pros and cons of breastfeeding versus bottle feeding.
Philip Paul was?
Yeah.
Oh, he is.
And he was the one that had the poignant statement. He says, "Oh, bottle feeding's way better. Breastfeeding, it's like chewing on an old fence post."
That guy was the
Oh, my
biggest
goodness.
kick in the show.
And his wife, Virginia, was kind of prim and proper and prissy and,
You know, I think that's what held the Bridge Club together for so long, was people came just to listen to Judy and Philip Paul
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah, well, they were good storytellers, yeah.
Oh,
So, and
it-
somebody
That
told
means
us,
somebody's on my back porch.
Oh,
somebody told us
oh, I saw
about,
that little thing.
they were at a dance or something, and some woman, and you fill in if you can
Oh,
remember,
yeah.
was talking to
She was
Philip, or
she was dancing.
dancing with Philip,
Yeah.
and she said, "You know, Bob," he was
She-
the other, wasn't he?
She thought she was dancing.
Right, she was dancing with Philip, and then another brother was Bob, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
So, and he and Philip kind of looked alike, I think. If I Judge, that was it. You know, Judge, I don't mind Junie. I don't mind you
I like you and I like Junie.
like Junie, but I can't stand that Philip.
And it was,
And then she was dancing with
and it was
him at the time.
somebody was a somebody
Yeah.
in the Ellenberg community.
Probably a Snebley.
Wasn't a Snebley, it was,
And they were related.
Maybe a Gregorich or something.
no, and I'll think of it. in a moment.
Hmm.
and who was she? I missed the,
Well, we're trying to come up with who she was.
oh, okay,
Her,
okay.
her husband was a Ellensburg star athlete at one point, and they were quite involved in the rodeo and buying and selling cattle. Seems like they might have had a sales yard, but is that,
We'll come up with
yeah.
Hmm.
What was the
Well, that's
thing that you
funny.
were gonna tell about buying, how to know which property to buy in the valley?
Oh, yeah, when Grandpa Priest decided to settle here, he started looking at land available for homestead, and he decided he was gonna pick the place with the tallest sagebrush. To, figuring that that would be the best dirt. And I think he was probably right,
Yeah, absolutely.
Didn't have any
Wow,
rocks in
uh-huh.
it, that's for sure.
yeah.
All these stories, we've all heard various versions of it. So who knows what the actual thing is, but
Yeah, really,
I'm sure there's grains of truth in all of them.
Yep.
there's some questions at this point that I wouldn't have the wherewithal to ask or bring up, because doesn't everybody have something in the closet they don't know whether it's really happening or not, you know?
Well, we're so far removed, but Margaret Ann, being a grandchild, and I think she was born either just before or just after he died, and so, and in those days, people talked to each other more.
Yeah, didn't have television and cell phones.
And you know, she heard all those stories directly from her mom and Grandma Flora, and so I think this account that Margaret Ann wrote is probably
Pretty accurate.
pretty accurate, yeah.
I'd always heard 1863, you know,
When he died, I mean, when he was
came
born.
through, when he came through.
When he
Get
came
that
through.
down.
1863.
Well, I
Well,
don't-
that's different from what Donald says on the tape, but
Well, he.
I think the paper I got from you about Joe Priest says 1863.
And that's more like when he was born, isn't it?
1848,
Was when he was born?
yeah.
Okay, 1863, well, okay, could be then.
But 15 years old.
But that's the paper you sent to me.
I sent
all
you
of
a
us.
paper? I
About
sent
Joe Priest, you know, when he crawled through
the little Joe stories. But I don't think I put anything about him coming here, that was all in England. And Jenny was asking about that stuff, and it was on my old computer, and my computer crashed, and I hadn't saved it to anything else like I should have. Luckily, I have printed copies
Of the
of the Little Joe
Little Joe
stories.
stories. I have, somebody emailed it to me. I have it on, I could probably pull it up on my phone.
You're kidding.
I think so.
Or somebody had to scan it then.
Uh-huh. I'll look. When we get done with this, I'll look. But I've seen it on my computer. With that title, Little Joe Stories.
I'll be gone.
I'll look.
that'd be
Would
great.
that be
Somebody
cool to-
smarter than me.
Get some of our archives from
Yeah, yeah.
Marie.
I think you do put it on ancestry.com, or there's a way you can, or
I
I don't know if
haven't.
you want to.
I want to. So my dream would be that we would get all of our genealogy, you know, accurate, and that we could have a little story attached to each person, or somehow or other link up all of these memories that we're sharing and have it on Ancestry, so that anybody that clicks on that person can learn about them. But I don't know if that's how it works. But I would like to tinker with it and see what we could accomplish.
Have you worked with Ancestry at all?
A little bit, yeah. So I've had an account, and but I just only know enough to be dangerous. I haven't really figured it out yet.
So Barry and Lucy, are you?
Yeah, it's probably time.
All right. Well, thanks everybody.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing all this wonderful
Yeah.